Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our webinar, Foods That Fuel Movement. My name is Kirby Brancifor. I'm a Wegmans nutritionist, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Please note that the information provided today during our webinar is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute or replacement for medical advice, medical nutrition therapy, or individualized nutrition counseling. I'll be coming back at the end to moderate our Q&A. And I'm now very pleased to introduce your presenter, my friend, Trish Kazakis, registered dietitian and Wegmans nutritionist. Take it away, Trish.
Thank you so much, Kirby. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm going to apologize. I do have some congestion that I'm dealing with. I hope my voice won't be too much of a distraction. If you need me to repeat something, please drop it in the chat and Kirby will let me know. But I'm really excited that you are able to join us today. I want to start by sharing with you our healthy eating philosophy. We believe that healthy eating is about nourishing your body and mind with foods that support health, fuel movement, honor your cultures and traditions, and make you happy. And while healthy eating often looks different for each of us and changes over time, we believe it can be fun, flexible, and full of flavor. And I've had the opportunity to interview sports dietitians who work with our college and professional sport team partners, and I've learned that they share very similar philosophies. They believe that optimal fueling should not only provide the energy and nutrients needed for movement and recovery, but should also support a healthy immune system, overall whole body health, and to support growth and development in children. They also shared with me that some of the strategies for choosing what to eat before, during, and after activity can sometimes vary slightly from what we would recommend folks to do the majority of the time, which is where flexibility comes into play. Now, research shows that a plant-forward eating approach is one of the most effective for promoting overall health. Plant-forward eating does not mean excluding animal products. Instead, it prioritizes eating mostly a wide variety of plant foods, such as fruits and veggies, whole grains, beans, and nuts and seeds. And the Mediterranean diet would be an example of a plant-forward eating mostly with plants, but it still allows for some animal-based foods. Now, the reason why plant-forward eating is so beneficial is plant foods naturally provide fiber to support gut health and heart health, phytonutrients, also known as plant nutrients, that have antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties, and hydration, particularly in the case of whole fruits and vegetables that are at least 80% water. Now, in addition to supporting overall health, fiber, phytonutrients, and hydration also support optimal physical performance. Now, let's look more closely at how specific foods and nutrients fuel movement. Our bodies rely on all three macronutrients, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, to provide energy, to support the activity we do, and post-workout repair and recovery. And each plays a distinct, crucial role. While carbs sometimes get a bad rap, they are the preferred and primary source of fuel for movement. That's because when we eat carbs, they're broken down into glucose, which provides energy for our muscles and brain. The two types of carbs that are most important for movement are complex and simple carbs. Complex carbs digest more slowly, which may prevent blood sugar spikes and provide sustained energy. Simple carbs digest more quickly for a rapid burst of energy. And I'll explain when one type of carbohydrate might be preferred over another in a few minutes. When it comes to proteins, they're essential for muscle growth, repair, and maintenance. And there are two main sources of protein: animal-based sources, for example, chicken, fish, eggs, and milk, and plant-based sources, such as beans, nuts, quinoa, and tofu. You may have heard that animal protein is superior for building muscle because it has a complete amino acid profile and plenty of leucine, which is the amino acid that is most important for stimulating muscle growth. And while this is true, plant proteins can also support muscle building. Just be sure that if you don't eat any or few animal proteins, that you include a source of plant protein at every meal and really focus on a different mix of plant protein sources so that you're getting adequate amounts of all essential amino acids. And then finally, healthy fats. These provide energy and help reduce inflammation in the body. And an example of healthy fats would be unsaturated fats like liquid oils. Other food sources would be avocado, nuts, and seeds. Now, in the case of saturated fat, that is where we can have elevated levels of LDL or the bad cholesterol, which increases the risk of heart disease. So we want to focus on limiting saturated fats, which are found in animal foods such as beef, pork, egg, full-fat dairy products, and tropical oils such as coconut and palm oil. So limit saturated fats and focus mostly on getting those unsaturated, healthier fats when we're having a fat source. And lastly, all of the foods that provide these macronutrients, they also provide vitamins and minerals that our body needs to function and move optimally. And some examples would be iron, which helps transport oxygen to our muscles, calcium and magnesium, which helps to support muscle contraction, and B vitamins that help convert food into energy. Staying hydrated is essential to overall health, but also optimal movement, because proper hydration is needed to lubricate joints, prevent muscle cramps, and to regulate body temperature. Even mild dehydration can impair our brain function, reaction time, and overall performance. In fact, according to research, over 50% of all athletes, from youth to professional sports, start their activity insufficiently hydrated. So it's really important not only for optimal health, but to fuel movement. Now, hydration needs are highly individual, but a general guideline would be to aim for at least half of your body weight in ounces of fluid per day. For example, 100 ounces of fluid would be a target amount for a 200-pound athlete. I'll share hydration tips for before, during, and after exercise, but a daily pro tip from one of our sports dietitian partners is to think early and often. For example, drink 16 ounces of water when you first wake up, or 8 ounces for a child. Then, do not consider a meal or a snack to be complete unless it includes some type of fluids. Also, make sure you're taking small sips of beverages frequently throughout the day, as this is the best way for the body to absorb fluids. Sources can include unsweetened water, milk, coffee, tea, and 100% juices, as well as whole fruits and veggies, as I mentioned earlier. Now, did you know that minerals such as sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium, they're also known as electrolytes? So it's not just sports drinks or electrolyte drinks that provide electrolytes. Foods can be a source of electrolytes too. So we've heard a little bit about how we want to support overall health. Now we're going to dig into understanding eating the right foods at the right time can really make a big difference in your energy level while you're exercising and your recovery afterwards. So here are some tips for what to eat when. Let's start with the pre-game fuel. The goals here are to provide energy, prevent hunger, and minimize GI distress. A general strategy would be to focus on eating some carbs and protein and to hydrate with water. However, there are a few different ways that you could approach this, which is where flexibility comes in. For example, if you're eating 2 to 3 hours before your game or workout, this is going to give your body time to digest complex carbohydrates and protein and can provide more sustained energy. So some meal examples for this would include an oatmeal with nut butter and fruit, or chicken with veggies and rice. However, if you only have about 30 to 60 minutes before your game, simple carbs, such as a ripe banana or a pineapple, may be better options as they digest more quickly for a rapid burst of energy. And if you know that you are somebody who is a salty sweater, meaning that you have a lot of salt that you lose when you sweat, you might also consider eating some salty foods in your pregame fuel. Something as simple as a few pretzels to provide the body with sodium, which actually helps to retain some fluid. Now, typically, we are constantly encouraging people to focus on getting more fiber in their diet. But fiber can slow digestion and cause GI distress when we're physically active. So this is another example of where you may need to be flexible and opt for foods that have less fiber in your pregame meal, and then focus on adding more fiber at other eating occasions. So for example, having a refined white bread might be better tolerated in your pregame meal compared to a whole grain bread. Now let's talk about during your workout, because we do have some goals here. For everybody, it's to prevent dehydration. I mentioned that before. A lot of athletes are entering dehydrated, which we don't want to do because that can slow down your performance. So you want to make sure that we're preventing dehydration. And then in some cases, you might need some energy and some electrolytes. And usually this is going to be for those that are engaging in activities that are high intensity or activities that are lasting 60 minutes or longer. So let's talk first about how to prevent dehydration. You want to think about drinking 8 ounces of water 15 minutes before the start of your workout. Then aim to have 4 ounces of fluid for every 20 minutes of activity. Now, adults can usually get about 4 ounces of water in 2 to 3 quick gulps, where a young athlete, it may take 10 gulps. But that's a good rule of thumb to keep in mind to stay hydrated during your game. Now, if you're engaging in an activity that is 60 minutes or longer, or is high intensity, this is a case where you might need some fuel. So this is where thinking about something that's easy to digest and easy to consume based on your activity. If we're thinking about electrolytes, sodium is going to be the most important. That's the electrolyte that we typically lose most in sweat. So this is a time where we've got to think about what are our options to provide some, simple carbs and maybe some electrolytes. Now remember, electrolytes are found in foods as well as sports drinks. So this is where, again, some flexibility comes into play. And you want to think about what is something that is quick and easy that I can have in the middle of my activity, and something that is palatable, something that you enjoy eating or consuming, and that you tolerate, because it won't work if you don't consume it. So here are 2 different examples of how you might approach it. A sports drink with electrolytes might be an option for a hockey player. They have a lot of equipment. It's really hard for them to do anything other than maybe squirt some fluid into their mouth during the middle of a game. Where a baseball player might have some more time in between innings where they might be able to have some pretzels, water, and a fruit pouch to provide those carbs and electrolytes. Now, after your game or workout, the goals here are to replenish the stored form of sugar, known as glycogen, and to build and repair muscles. Now, what you eat at this time will actually look very similar to the pregame fuel, because you're going to want to have some carbs, protein, and fluids. But a key difference here is this meal is an opportunity where you could include more fiber-rich foods because your body is going to have more time to rest and digest. Now, with that post-game period, it's usually a good idea to aim to have some carbs and protein within about 30 to 60 minutes post-workout. This can be done as a snack or a full meal. And again, this is where flexibility is going to come in because it's going to depend on your tolerance and timing and what you have available. For example, some people don't have much of an appetite after a workout. So something like chocolate milk or a protein shake with fruit might be great options because it's something easy they can swallow to start that initial refueling and then follow up with a well-balanced meal, such as chicken with a sweet potato and broccoli, or Greek yogurt with berries and granola within the next few hours. So we've talked a little bit about before, during, and after. So those are some tips that you're going to start with that overall plant-forward eating approach, hydration, thinking about what works for you at these different activities. But our sports dietitian friends shared some more pro tips that I wanted to pass along to you. The first one is don't skip meals because this leads to low energy, poor concentration, and potentially overeating later. The second tip is prioritize whole and minimally processed foods. And let me give you an example of that. Really think about prioritizing whole and minimally processed protein sources, such as milk, yogurt, nuts, seeds, and beans, versus relying too much on supplemental protein powders, because those foods will provide more nutrients and sometimes phytonutrients than just protein alone. I know I mentioned it before, but they said they can't emphasize it enough. Drink early and often to prevent dehydration. Also, make sure you're taking some time to experiment with different foods or beverages before your big game or event because you want to learn what works for you. Every body reacts different to different foods, so you want to have a tried and true approach before the big game. Remember that electrolyte replenishment doesn't always have to require a sports drink. It can be achieved through foods. That's why doing that experimentation works to find out how your body responds to different approaches. And finally, get creative when choosing foods to fuel movement. In fact, one of the dietitians said, dinner doesn't always have to be on a plate. A balanced meal can be something as simple as a whole grain cereal with milk or fruit, or crackers, cheese, and veggies. And what's even better is these are great foods to take on the road. In fact, you could even put it in a cooler in your car so you can enjoy a quick meal or snack in the car before you head home after the big game or event. So that is a quick overview of some of the tips and strategies. But if you're interested in learning more, I've got a few resources for you to check out. The first one would be to visit our Feel Your Best section of Wegmans.com. Here you're going to find two sources, one being our Eat Like a Pro section, where you're going to find a lot of the information I shared with you, along with some suggested products that align with those tips. And on our Whole Body Health page, you can view or download this handout. It's our Healthy Eating Guidelines handout that outlines a plant-forward eating approach. And finally, here are 3 resources that our sports dietitian colleagues regularly share with their athletes. The first one is the Sports Nutrition and Human Performance website. Now, this website is actually a practice group for sports dietitians, but they've got free resources that are available for you to read too, including tips on hydration, including giving you some more specifics about different times and approaches, carbs for before, during, and after meals, even tips for activities you might not be thinking about, such as for dancers or individuals who might be participating in a marching band. Those folks need to fuel their movement just as much as a traditional athlete. Next is the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. They've got some great articles, particularly if you're looking to fuel children and teens. Lots of great resources there. And I know Kirby's going to be sharing these links in the chat with you. And finally, the Athlete's Plate that was created by the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. This is a great resource, another glimpse of quick ways to create balanced meals for before, during, and after a workout, or even on heavy training days and light training day. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and attention. And I can see that some folks have dropped some questions in. So I'm going to stop sharing and ask Kirby to join me again, and we'll do a little Q&A.
Fantastic. Thank you, Trish, as always, for wonderful information. And before I move into the Q&A, I'm just going to let you all know I'm dropping a link to our survey. If you're watching with us live, it's right in the chat there. And if you are watching this on demand, you will find that link in the video description. We really can't stress enough how valuable your feedback is to us. So please do take a few moments to fill that out for us. So we have a ton of great questions, as you said, and I think we've got time to cover a lot of them. So I'm going to start with one that I know we have heard a lot that someone asked, which is, do athletes or active people have different sodium recommendations?
No.
All right.
No, it's a very, very common question, as Kirby said. The recommendations for athletes are going to be at the same recommendations based on their age or special interest group, because some individuals, if you have certain health conditions, have different recommendations. Children have different recommendations. So the recommendations do not change because you're an athlete. Where the difference comes into play are those situations where are you losing electrolytes through sweat, and it's going to depend on the activity, the climate that you're in. It can vary from workout to workout. And again, that first website that I shared with you, they have some great handouts about hydration with some tips to, it even gets into where you'd weigh yourself before and after and figuring out how to look for the right sports drink, because there's a lot of different formulations. So the short answer is no, recommendations don't change. But yes, we do need to appropriately replenish, particularly sodium when necessary, but it's not every day.
Great. Thank you so much. I think that's great, and definitely one we hear a lot, so hopefully that's helpful. We received a couple of questions on something I'm going to try to combine because I think they're all kind of getting at the same thing. So there was one who is really about like working out on an empty stomach or when you don't have a lot of appetite. So specifically, should I eat if I'm not hungry, especially if it's first thing in the morning? Is it just a banana okay if it's first thing in the morning? And then more specifically for cardio, for weight loss, is it okay to do it on an empty stomach? So they're all kind of related. So could you try to address those?
Yep. So I'm going to start with, when we look at research, and that's what we as registered dietitians do. We always look at the evidence. This question comes up a lot. While there are some studies in some populations and some situations where you might see a benefit to working out in a fasted state, where you might see a slight increase in fat use during that activity, we also have studies that don't show any benefit. So we don't have what's known as consensus, meaning repeatedly over time showing consistently that there's a benefit there. And if you remember the tips that I shared with you, one of the last ones on that pro tips was don't skip meals. I mean, overarching from our colleagues who are sports dietitians, and this is a specialty in our field, they're working with elite athletes and they don't encourage working out in a fasted state because, again, the research just isn't there. Your question, what if I'm just not hungry, or would a banana be enough? It absolutely can be. And it's going to be where, again, that experiment and tolerance comes into play. So usually if you're waking up first thing in the morning and you are doing a workout, it doesn't have to be a lot. Again, I'm going to point back to those handouts that are in that first resource because they give you examples. a banana could be a great example, because if you're in that 30 to 60 minute window, like I talked about pre-game, a small amount of carbs, like 30 grams of carbs, which you can usually get from like a medium-sized banana, would be great. It could also be in the form of a fluid, but it's going to depend on your tolerance level. My husband and I used to do long-distance bike rides. Bananas wrecked my stomach. So I had to find something that worked for me.
Right.
For some people, something like a Fig Newton, is something, again, it's where you might need to be flexible, but I would always lean with something like Tri-Fruit first, but sometimes in that occasion to be flexible, if it's what helps, you could try it.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice. And even thinking about like if you needed to add some protein to that, that's when you really start looking at your performance goals and maybe are working with someone who can start to fine tune. So if you're just looking to get through your activity, you just kind of check in with yourself, right?
Exactly.
So now, speaking of protein, a couple of questions, again, kind of go together. So do you have some suggestions for easy, high protein snacks, or even just general healthy snacks that are small and travel well on those kind of away from home activities? So any thoughts there?
Yeah, so a couple things, like our friend said, to be flexible with it. If you can grab something where you can have a small cooler, things like cheese sticks, even tuna pouches, where tuna pouches are actually shelf stable. So we even have salmon pouches. So sometimes those are nice, portable, high protein options. Plus you're getting omega-3s in the tuna and the salmon. Let's see, yogurt is another great one. If you do enjoy hummus, hummus and crackers can be another thing. So really think about those foods. For some people, PB&J sandwich is another way to get it. So your nut butters. So really, it's all going to depend on what travels well in your backpack, or if you can get a small cooler, put it in your car or bring it with you. Protein drinks, again, it's not to say they're not an option, but try to lean with those whole foods first and then rely on that if you need to.
Great. Yeah. And I know in our family, we like beef jerky and we do a lot of trail mix. So those are some of our go-tos. So
great additions.
Now you mentioned protein drinks, and we did have a question about just do we have tips regarding protein shakes, and also specifically, do we have a protein powder that we recommend? So sticking with the protein.
Yeah. So I'll start with protein powders. We have a lot of options. We have both animal and plant-based ones. The key is to try to find one that works for you. And definitely read the label, because they're not all created equal. Some will have additional attributes to them. So it really depends on what you're looking for in that protein shake. We do have a smoothie builder on the Eat Like a Pro section that I mentioned of the Feel Your Best section of Wegmans.com. Now that one doesn't limit you to having to use a protein powder, because you can use other protein sources in your smoothie. You could use yogurt, you could use kefir, you could use milk. So there's a lot of different ways that you can, but there's a nice formula there that they give you to make sure you're having some source of antioxidants from some plant foods and some healthy fats, as well as that protein, and then adding flavor.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I think we could squeeze maybe a 30-second plug on this last question. How to feed picky but active kids a nutritious diet. Do you have a kind of a back pocket answer for that?
Again, lean into those whole foods that we talked about. Check out that handout that I mentioned, the healthy eating guidelines, because a lot of the foods that kids naturally like are great for these options. I mean, think peanut butter and jelly. A lot of graham crackers are actually even a source of whole grain. So graham crackers and peanut butter. Fruit. There's a reason that a lot of moms bring oranges quartered up. It's something that kids enjoy. They get hydration and it tastes great.
That's great. Well, we are right up on time. I hope that we were able to answer so many questions out there for folks who are looking for that help. Thank you, Trish, for the wonderful information. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope you all have a wonderful day and feel your best.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.